case you don't know who we are by now, I'm Candace Kelly, Chief Legal Officer, and
I'm Justin Rice. I'm the VP of Ecosystem at SDF.
And we want to talk today about crypto winter. And Justin and I were talking on the way over here, and I said, is this the first crypto winter? I mean, I didn't join crypto universe until 2019. And you said?
Right, 2019 was a crypto winter. We were in the middle of one then. And I'm sure a lot of people who have been in the blockchain or crypto industry have been through several. But like that one was actually the first for me because I started probably working in blockchain around 2016, 2017. And there was this huge like surge in interest, I'm sure people remember, around the end of 2017. And then a crypto winter. And that crypto winter lasted for a long time, up until really 2021. And so it's not, obviously, where we are now, it's not unique. It's sort of cyclical. But yeah, for Candace, this is a new experience.
Yeah, well, I thought that was normal, and that 2021 was like this crazy boom, right? So, but I was curious, particularly from like the ecosystem and developer perspective, which you are so tuned into. Like, how has that changed just in the SDF ecosystem? There's a lot of crypto winter happening out there in the broader blockchain world, but what about SDF? What are you seeing compared to before?
Yeah, I think when the prices of crypto assets are driven high by speculation or by whatever drives them, right? You end up with a lot of people who are there to speculate. They're there to talk about the price of crypto assets. And when a crypto winter hits, a lot of those people move on. And so the conversation changes. And the great thing is that it changes for the better generally. You know, I feel like when crypto is in a boom, I have to be careful if I go to a party because somebody's going to find out that I work in blockchain and they're going to corner me and they're going to take a wide stance and they're going to ask me for investment advice, or they're going to talk about, they're going to look for like validation for some sort of token that they're super into, and I am just going to be standing there.
And you have Candace on your shoulder saying, walk away.
Right, I will not give investment advice, but also I don't want to be in that conversation, right? Like when you are cornered by some dude who's got a wide stance looking at you like fiercely, you're like, what is the out? What is the out? That's crypto boom. Crypto winter is like people who are enthusiastic. They're builders. They're here. They see the potential of the technology. They're like actually either solving great intellectual challenges or creating applications that solve for real-world problems, you know? And so you talk about use cases. You talk about technology. You talk about the kinds of things that the challenges that the industry faces both on the technological level and on the sort of social level, on the regulatory level. And all of those conversations are really where the fertile ground is laid, right? Like you're sort of putting down the mulch, the fresh topsoil that will allow new projects to grow. And I mean, I know that this is something that people talk about all the time, but if you look back to the sort of before the last crypto boom, that's when a lot of the applications and use cases, you know, things like AMMs and Uniswap were born, or things like NFTs and OpenSea were born. There's just like a tremendous amount of woodshedding that can happen, in part because the conversation has changed, because the conversation is not focused on prices, speculation. It's focused on the actual technology and what you can do with it. And so the real advantage of a crypto winter is exactly that. Conversation changes. And you know, it was interesting because when Alexis Ohanian was here giving the intro, he said it's his favorite time. So he's got a venture capital fund. For him, like getting rid of all of the noise and having like sort of the contraction of the world allow the conversation to change and allow projects to emerge that have real legs and real thought behind them, that's like the best time for him too, right?
Yeah.
So it's good for builders. It's good for people who like a healthy community, and apparently it's good for venture capitalists too.
Yeah, who knew? So are you seeing right now at SDF, there's a lot of stuff going on here that we've heard a lot about Sorbonne this morning, and I think there's a demo going on upstairs. There are a lot of new projects, so are you seeing any effect of this sort of focus on use cases, focus on the tech coming into play in people's interest and adoption of things that are happening in our ecosystem?
Yes. I mean, I think launching Sorbonne at this moment is actually a blessing Because if you were at the launch presentation today, the conversation was, you can say, hey, look, who should be using Sorbonne now? It's early adopters, it's tinkerers, it's developers. What are the advantages of Sorbonne now? And it's like, well, we figured out that we shouldn't have these constant serialization and deserialization loops. That's a pretty technical conversation that is directed at a specific audience that is much easier to reach right now. So launching something like Sorbonne at this moment actually makes things easier because there's less, again, less confusion. People tend to have more focus. And I think to answer your question more specifically, I look a lot at the Stellar Community Fund, which is this ongoing community funding program that we have that really helps early stage projects kind of get kick-started on Stellar. And if you look at the submissions for the current round, and even the round before, consistently, the quality of projects is higher. And that's because I think the people that are submitting have put more thought into them. They're building for the long term. They're both sort of more interested in the long-term future of the technology or in building products and services themselves that are meant to sustain. And so there's I think that the people who are working right now are much more generally sort of the ratio is different. The ratio of builders to speculators is higher now. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think if you sort of look at the cyclical, assuming that there's a cyclical nature here, which obviously I don't know, at the end of every cycle, ideally that ratio, the ratio of sort of builders, serious people that are in the blockchain space, that number keeps increasing. And so early on, there was a lot of speculation and little building, and I think with each crypto winter, the ratio changes, right? So that even as we emerge and move into a new era, when we sort of get past what's going on right now, I think we'll still have a higher ratio of builders.
Yeah. By the way, we have a relatively small group here. If folks have questions for Justin or me, we have a little bit of time. So just at any point, just wave your hand so we notice you. I think that the other piece, from my perspective, having legal and policy, is that it's really changed the conversation in the policy realm as well, and with regulations, because we're people like SDF, and as we speak on sort of behalf of the ecosystem, who are really using the technology for real live use cases and to solve real problems, are getting much more airtime and attention because the regulators and the policymakers want to try and figure this out, right? Last year kind of brought a lot of attention because there were the headlines, because there were big numbers, there were hacks, there were scams, and it's sort of this weird dynamic of it's those sort of bad things that happened have led to folks focusing more on what is this blockchain stuff all about? I mean, there's certainly plenty of people who think that that's all it is, but we are at the table being able to talk about all of the great use cases that exist in the Stellar ecosystem and getting more traction.
Is it a difficult conversation to have? The sort of negative things that precipitated a lot of the scrutiny from regulators, does it make it difficult to talk to regulators now?
No, I don't think it does, because we have actual concrete use cases, right? And I think that's part of why SDF and Danelle are often asked to talk to testify on the Hill, to talk at various conferences. I was in Frankfurt a couple weeks ago with the Atlantic Council. It was mostly central bankers, regulators, think tank folks, and they care. They're inviting projects like the ones that are in the Stellar ecosystem because there's real-world use case, and they know that we're not going to come and say, oh yeah, well we did this crazy thing and people were making a ton of money. That's not what we're focused on. And I think if there is a future, it's because there is a good use case, right? What do people need? What do people want? Yep. Alexis taught us yesterday, I think is really policymakers are on a spectrum, right? Some of them think that it's all, some still just think it's all for illicit finance and terrorist financing, and some think, okay, well there may be some uses, but give me some real use cases. Don't just wave your hands and say, oh, it's for inclusion, we can include more people, but being able to actually have concrete conversations about use cases like the MGI on and off ramps, I think is a really good example of that.
Do you think the sort of crypto winter era makes it easier to have those conversations? or it doesn't impact like sort of the ability to talk to those regulators at all? Like, is it easier to get their attention, or like I was saying, in sort of the community world or the developer world, because of the people that stick around tend to be more deeply ingrained and more interested in the long-term applications, conversations get easier, right? Because there's just less chatter. Is there like a similar effect that happens when talking to regulators?
You know, I think it's a little bit different in the policy and regulatory world. I think last year brought a lot of attention, and the fact that it's not like it is easier because there aren't quite as many like big news stories, I think. But so I think it's the underlying reason why regulators are caring and actually trying to move quickly, which is a sort of unprecedented in the United States, at least. The EU, we're going to talk later to a member of parliament, they move a little bit more quickly, at least in this arena. So I think that there is an effect, but it's a different dynamic going on than it is in the developer community, from what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess the question is, you know, emerging stronger from crypto winter. It's almost like I think that generally tends to happen, right? But it seems like what we're talking about are different ways that the ecosystem responds to a crypto winter that sort of allow us to emerge stronger. And I think that from the developer point of view, from the community point of view, and even from the foundation point of view, there is sort of a playbook here, right? Like you double down on what's working, you focus on use cases. And it sounds like the nice thing is that playbook and that part of the ecosystem just dovetails with a good approach for talking to policymakers and regulators, which is focus on the real stuff, right?
Yeah. And I think the hope is that as we're actually having real live conversations about stablecoin legislation and spot market legislation, that hopefully, if this is a cycle, and if we are do emerge from crypto winter, that there are some rules of the road in place by then. Like I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't make Congress move faster. The EU is doing their thing, but I think that, to me, I know there are probably many here who disagree with me, but having some rules and frameworks, I think, will actually allow the industry to move faster. Because anyone who is concerned about compliance, when you're moving value, you have to be concerned about it. And so if you're concerned about it, but you're not quite sure what rules exist and whether they apply to you or not, it's a lot harder to move fast and build things, not break things.
Build things.
Build things. Build useful things.
With urgency.
With urgency,
yeah.
Exactly. So I think that, yes, Adam?
I'm curious, your perspective, if you think this crypto winter was a industry self-inflicted wound from things like Terra Luna or Celsius, just what your view is on causation for this time period.
Yeah, I mean, you said, is it an industry-inflicted wound, right? And that lumps the whole industry together and assumes that there's one entity that's sort of like, you know, a monolith, right? It is not the industry as a whole that created this problem, but it is, you know, this is a new technology that has a lot of possibility, and I think that's what's remarkable about it. And with the sort of good will come the bad, right? And I think sometimes bad is just human error or just like bugs, things that are incidental, that are unintended. I think that in this case, the problems were created by people who were, I think some of them were straight up greedy, right? And I think that they were building protocols and mechanisms that sort of inflated the promise of returns, for instance, and that they were only survived as long as crypto asset prices kept increasing, right? And so that is a wound inflicted by, I don't even, like a sort of cynical optimism, right? Like a view of the world where you think, I can build something that it will just print money or something. And I think there are people who have built protocols like that. I mean, in the Stellar ecosystem, I don't think we see that kind of activity, right? But in the broader crypto ecosystem, I think there were certain people that were building that kind of stuff, and I think they'll come back, you know. And this is a place where I think policy and regulation can help prevent that kind of thing in the future. Short answer, I think it was inflicted by people in the industry, but not the industry as a whole. I think there's a difference between certain people who are building certain things and others, and it's important to differentiate.
Yes, I have a question. That the bank or they wanted to try right now in November. They wanted with Stellar the ISO 2022. They wanted to adapt it with Stellar and all the other crypto coins to work with them.
Can you repeat that question?
No, the banks are right now wanted to start the ISO 2022.
Oh, the ISO standard, yeah.
Swift and wanted to work with Stellar.
The question is about whether banks want to adopt these standards and work with Stellar right now?
Yeah,
correct. Not that I haven't had those conversations. Maybe others on my team have, but I don't think so.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in general, you know, SDF and many in the Stellar ecosystem are obviously trying to work with existing financial institutions to figure out ways to take the sort of blockchain rails that Stellar provides and to create more efficient pathways for payments. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of public stuff that we SDF talk about, people that we've talked to, partnerships that we've forged. But yeah.
Thank you.
But I think you can talk.
It looks like
we've
Rob
got somebody
back
who's
there
going to follow up with
is
you
the
later.
guy to talk to. So.
Rob. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. I was someone.
So again, congratulations on the partnership with MoneyGram. I have a question for the both of you, or shall I say a separate answer that I'd love to hear from both of you.
We'll fight it out. Who gets to go first?
Candace can go first.
Excellent.
Well, it depends how hard the question is.
Okay. We'll come to Candace anyway by default, which is, what would be a dream partnership for Stellar? Think, aim for the moon. What would that dream look like?
I think the MoneyGram partnership is a dream. Honestly, I think, I don't know if you were here when Alex and Danelle were speaking yesterday, but you know, anything where you're really reaching the underbanked and creating that access, I think is the dream. And to me, the dream is that we don't have just a MoneyGram partnership, but that's the model, and that's just the beginning of lots of people coming with creative ideas. Thankfully, in legal, they don't need us to be the engineers and come up with the super creative ideas. We just try and help make sure they're compliant. But so luckily, we have great, like the entire ecosystem. I'm always amazed with the projects that come through that we get to see on the legal side of my job. But yeah, so to me, anything that is really truly getting at our mission, which is creating equitable access, and I think MoneyGram, and from what I've seen sort of in the broader crypto ecosystem, it's one of the few examples where that's really happening.
Yeah, it's cool, right? You can cash in. You can actually get onto the Stellar network with cash. No other network offers that. That is an amazing ability.
And compliance.
Cash and compliance. There you go.
And even better compliance, right? I think that's the other piece that I love about the MoneyGram is that if you're just going in with cash, they can do KYC. They don't know where that cash came from, but they do their KYC and their checks. If you're sending it to a wallet, they have transaction tracing, and so they can do even more, right? So I always think about how is technology. If we're starting with cash as sort of the baseline, how is technology making it better, not just for the user, not just for the business, but also for the regulators? Because if all three of those pieces are enhanced by technology, and I think it absolutely can be. I think there's still work to be done on like sovereign identity and digital identity to empower the user and to meet some of the regulatory and compliance obligations out there and sort of figure out what that shift of responsibility is between the user and the software provider or the anyway, yeah, those are my praiseful words of the MoneyGram.
I'll say for me, just, and I think this is probably the last thing I'll say before we move on, but
yeah.
For me, the cool thing about that partnership, though, is not the potential necessarily just for future dream partnerships. It's that it sets the stage for organic grassroots growth. Because now anyone can build an application that can access Stellar via MoneyGram. You can integrate with MoneyGram. And so this means that there's a tremendous opportunity, not for SDF to go out and partner with people, which is there, but there's a dream of just having this public infrastructure where app builders can come in and take advantage of the existing partnerships to actually do really cool stuff. And so that's like the world that I work in, so it's very exciting to me. But the answer is, for me, it's grassroots growth over a specific partnership.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that like a lot of what we do at SDF right now is sort of seeding and helping build these partnerships. But yes, the real dream is that those things are happening and they're not partnerships. They're just, of course I'm going to use Stellar because that's the best rail to do whatever it is to solve this problem that I'm trying to solve. So, all right. Well, thanks, Justin. I'm going to let you go, and I'm going to turn to a virtual. This is my first virtual person. I don't know where she's coming. I think on these screens.